Hi, I'm on chapter 29 of Beyond the Echo Cavern by BreAnna Teschendorf. Okay, we made it. Now let's go slowly, Charlie instructed them. All their previous frivolity forgotten, the children were back in stealth mode. There appeared to be no one at all in the cavern. All was quiet. They found that, to their advantage, there were large boulders scattered here and there in the cavern. I think if we run, we can make it to that first big rock and hide behind it while we decide where to run to next, Charlie whispered. Okay, Annika agreed. Gabe nodded his consent, and they all took off running, like little ducks, 3 in a row, towards the first big rock, where they stopped and took another look around. They were undetected. They dashed to the next rock, and then on to the next. It only took a moment before they found themselves standing near the 2 cracks in the wall, one to the right, down which the working children had disappeared, and one to the left, where the crystals had been transported. Charlie pointed to the left. Gabe nodded. Annika glanced towards the door to the right, but only for a second before yielding again. Charlie held up his fingers. 1, 2, 3, and then turned and streaked towards the tunnel, with Gabe and Annika hot on his heels. The tunnel was also lit with torches. It felt hot. They could see right away that it led into another underground room. The room was full of dull white crystals. Their hearts began to pound in expectation. Charlie turned around to look at Gabe and Annika and said in an excited whisper, "Oh, pickles, guys! This must be it!" "Incredible," Annika agreed, looking past Charlie into the room. They entered the room and caught their breath as they peered around the room. The room rose up, up, up to a shocking height before them. It was an unfinished palace made entirely out of rough, unpolished crystals and other jewels. Parts of the palace were finished, showing off turrets, peaks, and spires, but most of it was still being built. It was clear that all work had ceased for the day. The immensely huge cavern was completely still and silent. "Now we know what they do with the crystal they dig up," Charlie said. "I wonder if they all live in it, or if only the witch lives in it," Gabe gasped. "It's so high, it looks like we are inside of a mountain or something," Annika added, craning her head back to see the top. "Highly unlikely, Annika," said Charlie, without further comment. But he too had his head tipped back and was staring up at the soaring, unfinished heights of the palace in amazement. Our 3 heroes were so caught up in staring that they failed to hear the rustle of snakeskin on the ground behind them. Only when the thing was standing at its full height in front of them, looking Charlie squarely in the eyes, did the children realize that they were surrounded. The snake, whose body was as thick as an apple tree trunk, had wound himself around them, so they would have had to jump over him if they wanted to run away. Now he loomed before them menacingly, with something like a smile on his indiscernible snake face. The children gasped in unison, but they all firmly stood their ground, not turning to run or giving the snake the satisfaction of a scream. The snake had assumed immediately that the children were trespassers. He could tell by their clothes, still bright with color and generally cleaner looking than the clothes of the children who worked daily in the mine. Furthermore, they smelled strongly of the fruity waterfalls, and even more so of the lovely medicinal sponge which had healed their backs. These smells would be lovely to you, but to the snake they were very disagreeable. They smelled putrid to him, and he could barely stand to be so close to them. He was prepared to attack them outright. But when they didn't run or scream at the sight of him, he became confused and doubted himself. He knew that only a few hours before, some children had been in the revolting waterfall cavern. It had been assumed that it was the children that Gondol was waiting for. It was possible, however, the snake mused, to reach that cavern by several different routes from the main cavern. He concluded that it was possible that some of his prisoners may have escaped, bathed themselves in the falls, and then returned. This was all doubtful, though, highly doubtful. His miners would never run away because they didn't even know that there was anything to run away from or to. All of this was going through his slimy snake brain as he encircled the children and then loomed silently before them, grinning his ugly grin. So, he spoke slowly, in his spine-tickling growl-hiss way, drawing out the word and growing the children's suspense, clearly enjoying the fear in their eyes. So, you have been in the waterfalls, have you? Miserable, stinky little brats. You know what happens to children who do things like that. He decided to test them with an ambiguous sentence. His long snake body writhed before them with dangerous energy. Annika, Charlie, and Gabe were at a loss as to how to respond to the snake. It never occurred to them that the snake might confuse them with children of the mine. They assumed that he knew that they were outsiders. They were surprised, therefore, that his main objection would be their innocent offense of bathing in the falls, and not the fact that they had come at all. Of course, Gabe, Annika, and Charlie literally did not know what happened to children who did things like bathing in the falls, and so none of them spoke for a few seconds. Charlie decided to break the silence. We won't ever do it again, he stammered honestly. He figured that he would never have the opportunity to do it again. No, you won't, the snake roared at them furiously. Gabe took a step towards Annika and took her hand. Charlie took a small step back. The snake noticed and felt an evil kind of pleasure that he had at last succeeded in frightening them. He raised himself a bit higher and said, I would take you to her, but then we would be short 3 workers. We're not, Gabe started to explain, now that he realized the snake's big mistake. Silence! The snake screamed at him before he could finish his explanation. Just shut up and follow me. The snake slithered out the entrance they had just come in. Just as he was turning to follow the snake, Charlie noticed the face of one child, white and full of longing, looking out at him from inside one of the palace walls. Huh? He started and nudged Annika. He pointed towards the face, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. What? She asked. I saw a child in that crystal, he whispered excitedly, even though he could do no more at that moment than walk on after the snake. Charlie was confused that the reality was so very different from his vision, but he couldn't dwell on his thoughts for very long as he was being marched captive, as he was, to certain doom. The snake led them down the tunnel that the other working children had disappeared down. Annika, Charlie, and Gabe soon found themselves in a very warm room packed full of children. The first glimpse of the captives shocked all 3 of them. Nothing could have prepared them for the spectacle of those kids. Not surprisingly, they were all quite dirty. Their hands and faces were smeared dark with dust. Their hair was matted and unkempt. In sharp contrast to this, the children's clothing was fancy. They were decked out to the nines. The girls were in sequins and pumps. their lips smeared red with lipstick. The boys had on expensive-looking shoes and glistening golden wristwatches. All the children were wearing various forms of jewelry, chunky gold chains, rings on their fingers, and dangling earrings sparkling in the torchlight. In short, the children looked ridiculous. The contrast of dirty with fancy was almost grotesque. If it hadn't been off-putting, Gabe, Charlie, and Annika might have laughed. The other children were deadly silent when the snake entered with his captors. They stared at our three rescuers with open mouths. The snake couldn't tell one child from another, but the minor children knew immediately that these three were not at all like themselves. "If you try to leave again," the snake turned suddenly, putting his face very close to them menacingly, "you will pay for it. I will nip your heels, and you will forever have pain that torments you while you work." Leaving these words to ring in their ears, the snake turned and retreated. They were left alone with the cave-dwelling children. End of chapter 29. Thanks for listening, and God bless you.